morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk about a magic project. Let me just show you first. This is the most beautiful train in the world. Let me tell you a story. We made it in Derby in England. And Derby is known for two things: pottery and making trains. It's got grey skies, grey pavements, grey gardens, everything is grey. And in England, the trains have to have an escape in the front because the tunnels are very narrow. So the train is built with a door in front. So the driver sits next to the door, and it looks as if the train's coming to you backwards. So you go in there, and they're making this ugly train, and this beautiful Gautrain and an ugly train. So we've got a contract with these guys. They can come once a year and just touch this nice looking train. But there is a reason why it's made with the nose as it is. It's supposed to be speed. The idea is that you're going to be stuck on Ben Schoeman in your car, and this train's going to come past you. You're going to think, maybe I had made a mistake. But 10 minutes later, when you're stuck in the same place, and the second train comes past, you know you made a mistake. So, just something about this infrastructure. If you're saying infrastructure is the driver for industrial development, infrastructure, on average, these projects take 14 years from inception until the president or somebody cuts the ribbon. These projects usually have multiple KPIs and not just engineering. And then thirdly, the argument is usually not about the project. The argument is about the Minister for Health or Education or Social Services saying, if you give me the money, I can do something else with it. So there's an argument about what could you do with the money if you don't spend it on the train. South Africa's political imperatives, it was spoken about this day. Today, we have two priorities in South Africa. For the next 20 years, two priorities. And it doesn't matter who becomes president or what political party runs the country, we have to fight poverty and we have to fight unemployment. So this is a given. But the government said the way that we're going to fight poverty and unemployment is through the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan is quite an ambitious plan. I was watching the TV when the president says he's going to spend 650 billion rand in the next 5 years on infrastructure, and he would spend 3.2 trillion rand in the next 15 years. Now, just to put it into context, when we built the Gautrain, we spent 3 million rand an hour. So every night I went to bed, we had spent 30 million to 50 million rand. We did it for 5 years. I didn't go to jail once, so it worked out quite well. But if you want to, so in 5 years' time, we spent about 26 billion rand. If you want to spend 650 billion rand, you have to spend 100 million rand an hour. So this country of ours have to have the ability to spend 100 million rand an hour, which is about 1 billion rand a day. Of course, if you don't spend 1 billion rand today, you have 2 billion rand tomorrow. If you don't spend that, you have 3 billion the next day. Now, this is quite a job to spend this. I had a team of about 300 of the best engineers, lawyers, financial guys doing this. So what we're saying is that if you want to spend this 100 million rand per hour, you need 30 Gautrain teams. So you have to have 30 project managers in this country that can run it. So I sat down and I said, if we want to do it, what do we need? We need to understand the time frames and the magnitude of the task. I've been in government quite long, and the idea of a politician is that you open the tap, and out of that pours infrastructure. You open the tap, and if somebody hasn't been doing the work for 10 years prior to that, there's no infrastructure that will come in the beginning. So you need to know what is the magnitude, and if you announce, I'm going to spend 600 billion rand on infrastructure, you have to have the backup. You have to have the backup and done the planning. You have to make a decision on contract form. Everybody in this room most probably uses FEDIC, but FEDIC is a contract form that we've looked at it. We have about a 35% cost overrun and between 30 and 40% time overrun with FEDIC. So FEDIC is not the best solution. We decided on a PPP, and that has got quite a lot of problems inside it. You have to be clear on the role and responsibility. If you're going to spend this block of money, if you're going to spend 3 million rand an hour, who do you report to? Who checks you? And I'll talk about it a little bit later. You have to look at external factors. We announced the Gautrain in January 2000 in the Premier's State of the Province address. 2004, we were awarded the Soccer World Cup. Trevor Manuel phoned me that evening and said, Jack van der Merwe, if you ever couple the Gautrain to the soccer, I'll kill you. The next morning, the Premier said, man, we're going to have the Gautrain ready for the soccer. So I phoned Trevor Manuel and said, kill the Premier. So you have to see how do you handle these external factors, because remember, you're negotiating with the best of the best. And as soon as you are at a disadvantage where the end of the negotiations must be where you have to have it ready for the soccer, then you're at a disadvantage. Governance, how do you manage this? How do you manage it without having the public protector or the Auditor General jumping on you? Risk identification, allocation and mitigation. Engineering is about risk. This is quite a difficult thing, but if you want to spend this amount of money, how do you do risk? Life cycle costing. In Africa, we are known to build something and then run it to death. You have to build it and you have to say, you know, I always use the example, if Bill Gates comes to us and says, they're going to build me a hospital, 500 million rand hospital, and give it to us. Within 2 years, the running cost per year is equivalent to the cost of the hospital. So to run a hospital, which costs 500 million rand, within 2 years it costs you 500 million rand per year to run it. So you have to factor in that. You need a central negotiating team. Otherwise, you're going to argue. We argued for 3 months on what force majeure is and all those things. Fraud and corruption. Remember, contracts are on risk. If there's a perception or there is fraud and corruption, they just load the price onto that. Broad-based black economic empowerment challenges. In the case of the Gautrain, we had half the empowerment groups in the one tender, the other half in the other tender. When we were negotiating in the end, we allowed BEEs that were in the opposite tender to join in because they just weren't enough. Budget allocation, remember, you're running this thing over a multi-year. In our country, we only have a 3-year budget, so you can only show 3 years of money, but you need to have longer commitments. Dispute resolution process, if any one of you is a lawyer fills the room with the amount of time that's available. Remember, a lawyer writes you a contract, and then he says, what if? What if the sun doesn't shine? What if the grass doesn't grow? And then you have all these what ifs that goes in that. So you have to decide, how do you sort out? How do you monitor and report? We had a one-pager that Trevor Manuel kept in his briefcase, A3, that you could see what was happening with the project. He said, and he used to show everybody else that's how it should be done. Insurance. Insurance is quite complicated. Forward cover. How do you make forward cover? You know that our government says they don't give forward cover anymore, so how do you protect yourself against forex fluctuations? Consultation and community buy-in. The e-tolls is technically the best system in the world, but e-tolls have lost the hearts and the minds of the people. So everybody in this room hates e-tolls. But just hold on to your hate. I'd like to talk to you in 10 years' time. When you are sitting in a car and you're moving slower than the ox cart, then you'll think back on the e-tolls that were thrown out. But in any case, the community consultation and community buy-in, if you don't do it, you do it at your own peril. Single point of contact, there has to be a single point of contact. A knowledgeable client. You have to have in government people that know what they're doing. And then you have to work like South Africa Incorporated, like they do in Singapore, like they do in all the countries that works well. If you have to choose one, if you don't have a knowledgeable client, please don't do a PPP. Otherwise, it'll never work. Right. So what I'm saying is that opportunity always knocks at the least opportune moment. So we have this 600 billion rand coming down the hill, but if you sleep, you won't see the Loch Ness. Gautrain rapid rail link, the past. Implementation. In a PPP, it's like a table, 4 legs. If one of the 4 legs fall out in the 14 years, you might as well kiss it goodbye. First one, you have to have political will and commitment. You have to have a politician who is willing to stand up in a room where you aren't in that will defend the project. It has to be a viable project, second leg, and it has to be technically, financially, and legally, institutionally viable. Third leg, you have to show the money. When we did the Gautrain, there were 140 airport to city links being designed in the world, 140. There are maybe 20 companies big enough to build it. So the first thing is do we spend money on this project because it takes very long? Do we invest in it? So you have to have, government must be able to show its portion of the money, and the private sector must show its appetite to invest. And the fourth one is, how do you get the community to accept it and buy into it? And we can talk to Nazir Ali. He missed it, and you know, it's now history. So you have to be able to sell the socioeconomic benefits. In the case of the Gautrain, we affected 1,800 properties. So we had to go to court 1,800 times, make offers. I'll never be invited to their weddings, their children's weddings, but we made it. What are the objectives of the Gautrain? You know, I started working for government on the 26th of June 1971. So I'm going for my 46th year now. Now, in the olden days, we used to build civil engineering projects. We used to evaluate them ourselves, give ourselves prizes. Now the life has changed. Now you're doing multidisciplinary projects. And the projects you do have a multidisciplinary KPIs. So what are we saying with that? In the white box, the project has to stimulate economic growth, local and foreign investment, new developments and job creation. So that's a non-engineering requirement. In the yellow box, we have to restructure the urban areas. We have to address the apartheid spatial distortion. We have to reduce travel distance and time and cost and improve the city's sustainability. And in the blue box, we have to promote public transport. In our country, public transport is a mode of force. People who use public transport only use it because they have no other option. And they all aspire just to buy a car so they can clog a bench a month further. And looking at business tourism and business development. So these are the KPIs, and one day when they do an evaluation of the train, if we achieved it, then we had spent our money well. PPP requirements, feasibility, you have to prove value for money, affordability, and risk transfer. And maybe just to give you an idea, a PPP is always to the private sector, the public sector. We create a SPV, the concessionaire, which has no history, has no balance sheet, and the user. So the public sector has to bring in land, legislation, subsidies and guarantees, rights of way and long-term vision. The private sector has to bring in world's best practice, design and build innovation, world's best practice, operations and maintenance, financing and access to the capital market. And the user, you know, there's a wet van transfer, the user has to pay, right? So that's how the thing starts. Now we go, if it works well, let's see what we get out of it. So if it works well, the public sector will get taxes, people mobility, economic development, socioeconomic benefits, and the life cycle funding. You may have seen the Civil Engineering Association of Civil Engineers have rated all the infrastructure in the country. The only infrastructure that got an A was the Gautrain, and that's because we have this thing, the life cycle in it. The private sector gets long-term design and construction contract, long-term operating contracts. They have a way of servicing their debt, they have income, they have profits. But then look what happens to the user. The user gets time and cost saving, the user gets environmental protection, and the user gets service quality. And again, if you look at the e-tolls, everything here has been ticked. The only thing here is the hearts and the minds of the people. So, process sequence, right? This is easy. We just work sequentially. Project identification, PPP legislation, the process, the tender planning, RFQ, RFP. Just to tell you, our request for proposal, our first one was 18 cubic meters of documents. It took us about a half a year to read through it. Then we saw it was too expensive, and we had to go to a best and final offer, so we went down on BAFA. They brought in 87 crates, and that wasn't good enough, and then we went out to a best and final offer. So it was a three-stage process. We selected a preferred and reserved bidder, commercial negotiations and financial close, construction, operations and maintenance for the concession period, and on the 26th of March 2026, they'll hand over the system to me in a good working order. But this is the process that really trips you up. Everybody in engineering knows about the sequential process, but the parallel process. Decision-making and authorization. Those of you that have ever worked with local government, to get a decision out of local government takes you 4 months. To get a decision out of provincial government could most probably take you 2 months. We set up a system where I could call a meeting in 72 hours. So I had a political committee, the MEC for Finance was my chair, we had 4 MECs, and we could call a meeting in 72 hours. If that wasn't there, I would have been talking to you today about a project that I think we are still going to build. Right? Legal processes, litigation, you get taken to court on content and on process. So if the process says, I mean, when we signed the concession agreement, they had a whole team of lawyers that had to check whether Trevor Manuel had the right to give me a treasury authorization one. Continuous communication, consultation, and public relations. Environmental processes, third-party involvement, cooperation and buy-in, socioeconomic development requirements, external pressure, the soccer, land requirements, and then continuous funding. Right. The deal, this is the deal. We have a SPV called Wombella. We have the government on the one side. We have the private sector, which Marion Roberts owned 25% of the equity. SPG is about 20 black economic empowerment companies. They own 25%. Bombardier is the biggest rolling stock manufacturer in the world. They own 25%, and Bouygues is the biggest construction company in the world. They own 25%. Then Bombardier sold 8% to J&J, and Bouygues sold 8% of the equity to ABSA. ABSA then, when they were taken over with Barclays, was sold it to Marion Roberts. As we speak, Bombardier and Bouygues are in the process of selling all their shares. So their shares are going to SPG, to J&J, and Marion Roberts. So this is a moving thing. But what is nice is that we will then be 100% South African owned. And then our operator is RATP, is the operator of the Paris Underground. This is our contract structure. It's 100,000 pages. So I had to read every page and sign every page in the end. We thought we were clever by putting it 100,000 pages. In the end, we gave the attorneys 100,000 pages to find mistakes. So this is just something that you have to remember. Complex problems have simple, easy to understand wrong answers. So if you look at the concession, you think, man, this is easy. Look at the theory of relativity. Funding, we have 5 sources of funding. Just to show you, we have provincial borrowing, 18%, the medium-term expenditure framework, 26%, the Division of Revenue Act, which is the national money, coming 44%, equity 2%, private debt 10%. Right? Then around this, I have about 3.75 billion rands worth of insurances and that. Socioeconomic development, we said we're going to do socioeconomic development. Cyril Ramaphosa had taken a year off. He wrote a document about what is empowerment. In the end, he said, it's complicated. So we said, fine, we will take empowerment as directorship, ownership, senior management, training and development, job creation, skills development, procurement, subcontracting. All right. So what we then did is that this is, you'll see the black line. That is what was offered by the tenderer, and you can see we had quite a vicious way of monitoring him. And if it didn't work, he could get 12 demerit points, and that would constitute cancelling the contract. So you can see the overperformance that we've achieved, and I think this worked quite well. Economic impact, I don't know whether I should talk to you about this, but we had a company, at that stage a very good company called KPMG, and what we did, remember, we said this project has to stimulate the economy. This project has to have an impact. No. 5 minutes. Right. We said the train would have an impact on the economy of Gauteng. So we appointed KPMG 5 years after we'd started running the project and said, look at what we've done. So we appointed them and we said, what is Gautrain's contribution to Gauteng's long-term economic development, Gautrain's contribution to public transport becoming the mode of choice, and Gautrain's contribution to Gauteng's improved spatial development. So this is a very interesting report. Really, if you want have a look on our website. It is on our website. And this just says we've created about 125,000 jobs. I have 125,000 IDs that were checked and verified by the independent socioeconomic monitor. The amount of skills, and what I like about it, they've created multipliers. So they've said, if you invest in infrastructure, this is the multiplier. This is the multiplier for jobs. This is the multiplier that goes down to the poor. And this is quite, but I'm not just going to see that my light is on. So please, if you want to have a look at that, it's good. Now, 3 years ago, I spoke to a gentleman here. In 1975, I was seconded to the CSIR, and we did the PWV transportation study. So 40 years later, my MEC says to me, go back and redo the study. But the PWV study was just for roads. This study had to be for all transport. So we redid the study, and you know, for transport planning, you look at population, you look at jobs, you look at where the people are going to stay. Right, so we did that. This is Gauteng population. We're heading for 19 million people in 2037. Right? Now, this is the job opportunities, and it's quite interesting to see the bigger the circle, obviously the bigger the jobs. This is the current, and this is the predicted jobs in 2037. So again, they're all next to the freeway, so it's all transit-oriented development. And then we took all the land use plans that had been given. You'll see there's a urban edge that we're trying to contain the growth of the 3 metros, and we said, where do we put this 19 million people? In the end, we ended up with about 1.5 million people that we couldn't place, so we came up with the idea to say, let's densify in that corridor. So we are densifying, making land use 50, 60, 70 units per hectare. We then said sustainable transport has to change the travel patterns. But this is the 3 shifts that we have to do. We have to shift as much as possible of motorized transport to non-motorized transport. We have to shift as much as possible private car use to public transport. And we have to shift as much as possible from road to rail. These are the 3 shifts. If we in Gauteng don't do this right, we're dead. Right? We have to use environmental friendly technology and be clever at what we're doing. So this is just to say what is happening, but the short of it is that our average speed will go down to about 12 kilometers an hour, 12, 16 kilometers an hour. And this is the speed on the freeway. Let me just show you, and I'll show it now. So what we said in the study, this is the existing Gautrain, goes from Hatfield down to Park, and we're saying, let's look at a line that goes from Mamelodi, 45 degrees down to Naledi, and then looking at a line that goes from Lanseria Randburg into that. That's the airport line. Right, additional rolling stock. This is our rolling stock. We are transporting about 1.5 million people a month. We've transported, I think, 65 million people up to now. We run on a availability of 99.5% and higher, and punctuality of 98.5% and higher. It's comparable to any system in the world. We need more rolling stock. I got the DBSA to give me 4 billion rand, so we're buying 48 new carriages at the moment, so the process is going on. Then we're done. Gautrain 2, this is just our travel speed. This is the Freeway Network, and you can see that's in 2025, and this is in 2026. So there's no way to hide. You can duck and dive the freeway system. You're just going to get on another route. That's going to this is what we looked at. We looked at 37 various route options, and so this is the feasibility. It was handed in April, and we're waiting to hear whether we're going to do it. So our first line will be the green line, Little Falls, Cosmo, Randburg into Sandton, and next separate tunnel to Marlborough, and then this is the full system that's going to run 19 stations, 150 kilometers of track. Enclosure, and I used to put this up as a joke, but I think it is true. When you do a project like this and the light goes red, you always start off with enthusiasm, promises and programs, disillusionment, and panic. Then the nice things kick in. Then it's hunt for the guilty, it's punishment of the innocent, which is going to be me, and then it's reward for those that had nothing to do with it. just says, whatever it is that hits the fan won't be evenly distributed. So in the PWV, you have to know where to stand. I'd like to end off by quoting a communist. Karl Marx said, the philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point is to change it. So the point is not to talk about infrastructure, but to build it. But if you can quote a communist, you might as well quote a capitalist. Ronald Reagan said, the future is not for the faint-hearted. Thank you very much.